Welcome back to another episode of Cap and Trade. I am your host, Texans Cap. You can follow me on Twitter at Texans Cap, or if you prefer the written form, capandtrade.substack.com. Got a jam-packed show for you tonight. We'll get our guest on here, Mr. Jeff Risdon. Jeff, how are you, sir?
Good to be with you. It's draft eve. It's my favorite time of year.
I'm about broken, man. I'm the news with Houston. It's changing every about 30 minutes now, and I've about hit my stage where I'm just nothing would surprise me at this point. So
it's very hard to keep up with everything that's flying out of Houston, out of various orifices in Houston.
yeah, no, I hear you, man. So if for all everybody listening in, watching in, appreciate you. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Jeff is the managing editor over at the Draft Wire for USA Today. And are you still covering the Browns Wire as well? Or no, the Lions Wire?
Just do Lions. Yep. I gave up Browns. Used to cover the Texans for Texans Wire. I was the original founding editor there.
Yep.
Before we moved along to give that to Mark Lane. So,
yeah.
All
right.
We're in fewer hats these days.
That's good. Yeah. So, man, we'll dive right in. Before I get to that, I just have something to say to Scott Fitterer in Carolina. You're off my Christmas card list. I don't like you anymore. Frank Wright and his staff were all over C.J. Stroud. They were ready to go with them. And then Scott Fitterer and his staff said, I think you'll like Bryce Young better. And so Scott Fitterer is off the Christmas card list. So I just want to get that out of the way. So
I feel that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a rough from week 18 up until now other than D'Amico Ryan's hire, it's been a rough go. So watching Bryce Young slip out of our little fingers, going to Carolina, and then no clue what's going to happen at 2. I was certain about a week ago. Up until about a week ago, I was pro Carolina was just bluffing. They're going C.J. Stroud, and Houston will land Bryce Young. And then finally, my will was broken last night. And then so now we're on to pick 2 and what they're going to do. And at first it was Tyree Wilson, then it's Will Anderson, and then it's Will Levis. And then I don't know anymore, man. I don't know anymore. And I wouldn't even want to put you on the spot of what you think will happen, but do you have any particular guess you would like to put your name on here?
So my guess, I actually just published my final mock draft over at DraftWire about 20 minutes ago before we started doing this. And I have Will Levis at 2.
Oh,
but
man.
It is just a guess. And I also, the commentary for it, I wrote, it wouldn't surprise me. I can almost quote myself. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Tyree Wilson here and the number 12 pick somehow becomes Will Levis.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that Will Levis is going to be one of the first 4 picks in the draft. And if he's going to go to Houston, you might as well take him at 2 because I'm not sure that he'll be there beyond that. But I'm not sure that they would trade up either that far. But it's one of those things where if he does happen to fall, like if the Colts like C.J. Stroud more, and I don't know why they wouldn't, but I don't know why Houston wouldn't either. But
I can't get a feel for where Indy's leaning. I've asked around, and I've had one person tell me they heard it. Richardson. I've had another person tell me they're all in on Levis, and just I can't get a sense for there. And that's kind of the wild card for me. And I mean, I said on this show 2 weeks ago or maybe it was last week, that I thought Will Levis was QB2 on the board for Houston, and took a little bit of heat for it, but it seems like that's starting to come to a fruition. It just, at what point does Nick I get the notion, just take him. Don't try to get cute with it, and trying to get cute and get Anderson at 2. But I think Houston is expecting Levis to slide. I don't know what makes them think that. Maybe they think Indy's in on Stroud and Vegas will pass on a QB. I know Ziegler's kind of a wild card in Vegas. Heard he's, kind of a work in progress as a GM, and just he's very unpredictable. So,
they got that's a dynamic that's going around, not just with what's going on. Like Arizona, rookie GM, rookie head coach. You got a new regime, new head coach in Indianapolis. You've got very young, inexperienced guys. Even Detroit, the team that I cover, they're only going into their third year together.
Yeah.
Las Vegas, new people. There's a lot of variables that go along with that makes it all that more unpredictable. So if you're trying to game it so you can get a guy later, you probably should just take him if Nick Caserio wants Will Levis, he needs to take him at 2. Is the long and the short of it. It wouldn't be what I would do. Will Levis is my number 62 overall player, but I get. I've seen very good Houston teams go down because they didn't have anything better than Brock Osweiler or the rotting carcass of Matt Schaub at quarterback. If you can get that ahead of time, then you can make some hay. But you got to get it right, because you would know this better than I would. But if you miss on this pick with the way that season ended, I don't think Nick Caserio is in trouble now, but I think in 2 years that would be a really big problem for him to try to explain to Cal McNair why I did what I did when I had other options that are probably going to wind up being really good players.
Yeah, and I think that's the discussion being had at that level. Is I don't think McNair is meddling. I don't think he's making any dictation or anything like that, or any specific orders. But I think he's like he's like, let's not get cute. Let's just take the quarterback. And I think Nick's like, I think I can get Anderson or Wilson, and we can trade up into like 8, 9, 10 and get Levis. And, that's probably the discussion to be had. So we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, we've talked about 1 overall here. I kind of I don't want to get bogged down by this pick at 1.02, because we can just spin our heads all day on it. I got some other things I wanted to ask you on.
Sure.
And speaking of which, with the rookie QBs, the rookie GMs, you said that. I saw a report that the Eagles were laying the foundation to maybe trade up. And I was like, man, Howie's just going to have a field day with like Monty Osenfort or somebody up there.
Absolutely.
That's like the worst person to trade with. He just wins every time.
You're going to be on the wrong end of that hose, man. You just do. They pick they're scheduled to pick 10 and 30. They're not making either of those picks. They're moving out. Yeah. They're moving around. They'll be picking somewhere else, and they'll probably pick very good players, because that's how good teams stay good. And Philadelphia has stayed good for a long time.
So, speaking of Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson, who is the better fit for D'Amico's scheme? With I don't have the intimate knowledge of his scheme that you probably have a little better idea about it.
Yeah, so it's good because it is going to be a different fit for every team. D'Amico, to me, is like, this is a guy who played under Romeo Crennel. He's of that ilk, but they got away from that a little bit in San Francisco with what he's been cutting his teeth on as a coach. So I think if you can live with Will Anderson not being great against the run, then you're probably going to like him, because I think he's a much more refined and accomplished pass rusher. But it's tough with Wilson, because I don't think Texas Tech used him very well. I think they saw, this is our best player, we're going to put him at our most impactful position, and it might not necessarily be where he plays in the NFL. I think he's a hand-down guy, and they played him standing up wide 9 a lot, or that even off the ball a little bit. That's not how he's going to win in the NFL. So if you're going to play that style, you probably want Will Anderson. But if you want, a guy that's going to be more of an inline guy, a bruiser, a guy, I don't want to say J.J. Watt, because that's not right, but a guy who can play that sort of role, that's much more Wilson than it is Anderson. Anderson is not a guy who's going to win a lot with power. He has it, but he doesn't necessarily win with that. He likes to set the speed up with the power a little bit. Whereas Tyree, he's got that length. He's got the extreme upper body strength, and he uses it very well. He torques his shoulders and arms so well when he's made contact. The key for him is to make that contact quickly. So if you're going to play him, 5 technique, 6, even a 7, I like Tyree Wilson better in that scheme. If you're playing a guy standing up, Will Anderson all day.
Okay. Yeah, and absent the concerns of foot injury and what Wilson's coming off of, and I think that would just be another concern for Houston fans after the Derek Stingley saga to draft another player with injury history would be a difficult pill to swallow in some cases.
I would agree there. Although Stingley, I think at the end of the season, I think he's going to be fine, but the delayed gratification on a top 5 pick is tough.
So I think somebody put it up here in the chat. So you had Nolan Smith at 12 for Houston.
I did, and
what was your thinking on that one?
So that's going on the theory that they got Levis at 2, and I don't think that any of the other premier pass rushers are going to be there. And I like what Nolan Smith offers, and to this defense, he does what Will Anderson does more than he does what Tyree Wilson does. He's a weird player though because he reminds me of Barkevius Mingo, and I know that's a fairly obscure poll, but he's
he played here.
He did, didn't he?
Yeah, it was a part of the. I don't know. Anyway, go ahead.
He's a power-oriented guy who's really undersized to be that. But like Mingo was, I think he was the number 5 pick. He went to the Browns. Didn't work out. Nobody worked out for the Browns in that era, so I'm not going to hold that against him. But he wound up he lasted in the league a good long while being a role player in that. He wasn't as dynamic of an athlete as what Nolan Smith is. And I think that's where Smith can have an asset. We're missing out on him because he didn't play at the end of the season. He had the pectoral injury, which, if you're concerned about recurring injuries, that's something you got to monitor. He's a guy that I think is going to be a consistent, 6 to 9 sack a year guy, but also a really, really good run defender. He was Georgia's best run defensive player, regardless of position, when he was healthy. And that's, when you're in a division with the group that they've got to face, Derrick Henry, for all we know, is still in Tennessee. You still got Jonathan Taylor going on. Yep. You've got to be able to stop that. And I think he would be a good fit for doing that. I like him a lot better than I like Lucas Van Ness, who was the other name that I had there in pencil.
I was going to ask you about that. I saw you had him pretty far down the board, and
I don't know what to do with him. I think he could go 10 to Philadelphia. I also think he could fall to 28, 29, 30 even. I don't think the NFL knows what to do with a guy who never started in college, and he's Bluetooth, man. He plays completely hands free. He has no clue how to use his hands.
Yeah, that's what Seth Payne's been saying every morning. That
Seth's a smart guy.
Yeah, yes, he is. It's interesting that the hasn't started thing, but that's a seniority thing with how Iowa runs things. Right?
100%. That's not a reflection.
His snap count's high, but I've heard second or third hand that Van Ness is the second edge on Houston's board behind, or probably third now behind Wilson and Anderson. So
that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. And maybe they can teach him up a little bit. As for day 2, they're at the top of day 2. Assuming we'll work under your premise, your exercise of quarterback's gone on the first day for the team.
Yeah.
And then they've gone with an edge at 12. At this point, you've got to be looking for a playmaker on the offensive side. Yeah, I mean, I think the only other area would be center.
Center is, to me, the biggest black hole on that offense right now. I mean, I can make Nico Collins work. I can make later round receivers work. I can't, and I put it in the mock draft. I had John Michael Schmitz as the number 33 or 32 pick. I love him. I think he's a very, very good center. He is in my top 20 overall players. I think he's a fantastic talent. He's scheme diverse. He reminds me of Alex Mack, who was a very good center for a very long time across a couple different teams. Mm-hmm. He's got that kind of movement skills. He's got that kind of range, but also if he gets locked on, man, he gets those shoulders set, it's over. Like, you can run to either side of him and it doesn't matter. Like he's got that locked down. So I think That's actually my favorite pick for Houston that I made in that final mock. And I would love for them to get him there. And I do think he'll be there. I don't think he's going to go in the first round, even though he is the consensus top center, just because there's a lot of people that don't like him. And I'm not sure that they understand Minnesota's offense very well. Like that's not a good team. PJ Fleck. I love PJ Fleck. As you know, I live in the West Michigan area.
Right.
I used to host his coach's show on the radio here.
Yeah.
I really like the guy, but I'm not sure that he's like all there with what his concepts are in matching the players that he has to the scheme that he wants to run. And I think Schmidt's suffered from that a little bit at Minnesota.
You think Schmidt will slide right into a zone scheme that Houston's probably going to run out?
Yeah, there are other guys that are going to have a little bit more agility than him, but I love his ability to engage in space and lock it up. Like he might not get 5 steps away, but at 3.5, 4 steps away, he's the best center in this draft by a good margin.
Where do you have Tippmann at on your list of centers?
So he is, I think I have him going in the 3rd round. He is in the, I want to say 70s overall for me. I'm concerned. I am someone who is gun shy about soft tissue injuries. And this is a guy who tore both of his shoulder labrums. That scares me. Now he recovered and played well after it, but that's, that's something where I'm going to be gun shy. And, talent wise, he's probably worthy of a 2nd round pick. And I could entertain an argument from people just going off of film that he might be a better prospect than Schmitz. But with the health background, he's also a little bit older than I can't do that. I wouldn't hate him in Houston. I think he'd be fine. He does have range. He can really get out and excels at engaging second level. He can combo block. He can stand up to the bull rush a little bit better than Schmitz, but there's, again, the injuries are something. And I cover a team that has a 2nd round pick that's played like 5 snaps in 2 years. It's tough. It's tough to do that. And I, as a draft analyst, I've always erred on the side of extreme caution with the injuries like that. So that's one of the reasons why he's lower. His film is better than that. I'll grant anyone that.
So one player that I wanted to ask about, and Beige here puts him up here, Steve Avila. Houston brought him in for a top 30 visit. Kind of sparked a little bit of interest. He, played guard, I think, this past year and then he's got some time at center as well. Do you think he projects as a guard, or does he have the ability to slide over to center?
He is not a zone center. I think he could be a gap scheme center, but he just doesn't have that sort of agility. He's a guy that it takes him a little bit of time to get rolling down the hill. Once he's going, he's great. I love the guy. He's another guy. He is ranked higher for me than what he projects to go. I think he's going to be a very good NFL player. He's not going to be a guy that's going to, he has his limitations, and I think the limitations are better served playing guard than they are at center, because then you're interjecting. Then, okay, I got to worry, like, what if the linebacker A gap blitzes and I'm late to get it? Like, he's not going to pick that up. Where I think a guy like Schmitz can pick that up. But if you want to plug him in a guard, do it. I don't necessarily think that the Texans really need a guard.
Not now. I mean, we're hoping the Kenyon Green experiment finds its way back forward and can make himself at least serviceable and show some life. And then they traded for Shaq Mason. He's got 1 year left on his deal. I thought an extension was going to get done pretty quickly after that trade, and nothing's happened. So I'm not entirely sure why, if there's a conflict
that's an interesting thing, because I thought the same thing. I might have picked it up from following you, but I thought that was going to happen too. I thought that would be like, oh, they're making the trade, this is their long-term pillar, and they haven't actually done that. That's kind of strange. But
and I don't know if it's just something they said, well, let's talk about it once we get through the draft, which very well may be the case, or if they're way off on numbers. Nothing has been said or reported or anything about it. So if nothing's been reported, then I'm just going to lean on the fact that they've just said, let's table it, let us get through the draft, and then we'll come back and talk. But I mean, I think And I love the idea of a center. I love the idea of a center at 33. But if that's not the direction they go, at that
Mm-hmm.
point, they've got to be looking at some form of a playmaker.
Yeah.
They got Damian Pierce is not a bell cow, in my opinion. He's a good running back, but he's just not your full 3-down guy. And I think, and Devin Singletary's signed a 1-year deal, so that's not any long-term option. This team doesn't have any speed on the outside whatsoever. They've got Nico Collins, Robert Woods, John Mechie looks like he's back. And then, it's just, there's no, from what you saw in San Francisco where they have McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and just all these guys that you just find space for and let them get the ball with space in front of them and make plays. There's nobody on Houston offense that can do that. And I think at 33, if you're not looking at center, then to me, either linebacker, but playmakers to me is just something, not so much as has to be a specific type of receiver. It doesn't have to be a specific type of running back. I just want a freaking athlete that can do something with the ball in his hand with space.
I don't disagree with that at all. And I do think that you can get at running back, I think you can wait a little bit and get a guy like Ty J. Spears out of Tulane, Devin A. Chain from Texas A&M, even Deuce Vaughn if you want to go super small. Kedre Miller fits out of TCU. That's a guy that can make things happen. I do think that you can do something with that a little bit later after that. Like in this range, you're still plugged up into the wide receiver. Now, Josh Downs makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
The wide receiver out of North Carolina, he's small, but the fight to size of dog ratio in that guy is really, really good. So I like that. And he's played in an offense where you can see how it translates into the NFL better than some other ones do. So he makes sense.
Does Jamar Gibbs make it to 33?
I don't think so. Okay. I think he's awesome. Yeah, I can 100% see the Los Angeles Chargers saying, Austin Eckler, you want it out? Okay, we got a guy that's better than you already, and making that happen. But he's fantastic, man. He's in my top 15 overall. I love that guy. And I think he is McCaffrey-esque. I don't want to call him Christian McCaffrey, but he can do a lot of the things that Christian McCaffrey does, really, really close to that level. If he's there, that's one where you supersede other things and take him. Because I'm with you. I like Damian Pierce. I like what he does. I think he's a good quality, like 1B running back, but you need 1A with him.
Yep.
And that would be that. But this is a great running back class, man. It's so deep. Like everybody talks about Bijan. Roshan Johnson, that dude can play too. Now he's not the kind of back that's going to make plays for you. He's slower than most tight ends, but guy can play. So there's a lot of options with that. So in day 2, even early day 3, I think you can add speed there at running back and wide receiver too. A guy like Tyler Scott out of Cincinnati, Jaden Reed from right up the road here from me at Michigan State is a dynamic guy that's probably going to go 3rd round, maybe late 2nd. There's options there for that better than there are at some of the other positions where they need it. And linebacker would be another one. So
Marco is curious about Zach Evans.
Yeah, from Ole Miss. Yeah, he would fit too. He's a little bit later. He had a really bad game. Aside from the one where he dropped the ball against Mississippi State, but he's probably available in the 4th or 5th round. And again, that's a good player. Can't think of his name from Oklahoma. Is Eric Gray is another one that fits. And because there's so many of those guys, you're probably going to be able to wait a little bit on that if you need to.
Yeah, I've anybody who watches this show knows that I'm a proponent of round 3, round 4, round 5 running backs. I get Bijan Robinson is a kind of a special player, and I'm not against taking him early. Certainly not against it by any means, but I think there's other value to be had elsewhere later in the draft, like you're talking about. And
what's funny with Bijan is you can go. I do podcasts with a number of different teams, even like the official teams, and every single one of them is like, "We love this guy. We'd be happy if we drafted him, but we don't really want to draft him because it's not, the value isn't there." It's like every single team feels that way. Where he's going to go, tremendous mystery to me. He could go 8, he could go 28. Who knows?
Yeah, I think I said it here that I would have to be an a-hole GM with Bijan Robinson because I'm not extending him. I'm going to do his
Yeah.
5 year. I'm going to do, if I draft him first round, I'm going to do his 5 years. If he's still running great, I'll franchise tag him. 6 years, about $40 million. Sorry, not doing not doing an extension, not playing that game, not getting into the Todd Gurley, Ezekiel Elliott issues that other teams have gotten into. So
Yeah.
I would be hated for that as a, telling the other players we're not doing that, but that would just be my take on it. But yeah,
I agree with you on that.
Yeah, and speaking of playmakers, this is one other one local, Tank Dell.
You can't go wrong with Tank Dell.
Man.
That guy was so open all the time.
It seems like Jim Nagy tweets about him like once a week.
He does. I am a Clayton Tune fan, probably more than most draft analysts are.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons I am is because he had Tank Dell, quite frankly.
That's an interesting name, Clayton Tune. Well, I wonder if he actually gets drafted or not.
I think he does.
Yeah.
I think there's fourth, probably fifth round. So I was at the Senior Bowl, and like first day, he was best quarterback there. Mm-hmm. And then the next 2 days, it's like, where'd that guy go? What happened?
My goodness. I'm sitting there looking. Oh, it's Nathaniel Dell. I'm trying to figure out where he is on my list. Nathaniel Dell. Yeah, he's a little bitty guy, but man, he's got some juice to him. That's for sure. And that would be, I don't know. It'd be tough to take another small wide receiver, but like we talked about, I think this team just needs athletes.
He reminds me of Sky Moore from last year, who went to the Chiefs. Another undersized guy, another Western Michigan guy. Not to stay too local.
What about another area that I think this team is going to have to really look at would be linebackers. So they've got Christian Harris, which I think is going to end up staying at will. I don't know that he would ever shift over to Mike. And then they've got
not.
Yeah. And then they signed Denzel Perryman to a 1-year deal, low-level deal. Christian Kirksey may or may not even make it to training camp, depending on what they do in the draft.
Yeah,
because he's got a decent-sized salary compared to performance. He's on the wrong side of 30. I think Perry's 29. I mean, there's just really no long-term options beyond Christian Harris in the linebacker core once you start getting into linebacker 4, 5, and 6 for that group. And this, Frank Ross, the special team coach, really loves a lot of speed, from the linebackers with his special teams. He has created a top 3 special teams core the past 2 years here. But the team is going to have to find some type of solution at the mic. And I wouldn't hurt my feelings if they looked at that at 33. Maybe I think that's probably maybe in the 40s or 50s is where Nick makes his move up from 65. He's got 4 6-round picks to play with. It's not uncommon for him to trade up in that honey zone of 2nd and 3rd round. He's done it his first 2 drafts with Nico Collins and then Christian Harris and John Mechie. So are there any late day 2, day 3 that can play kind of fit that Fred Warner type role in D'Amico's defense? Not the performance of Fred Warner, but
yeah. Well, you would hope for that.
Yeah.
I like Dion Henley out of Washington State quite a bit. Now he's smaller. This is a guy who's a converted safety. He played at 228 pounds.
Yep.
He's a little bit bigger than that now. He's up to like 232, I want to say. Mm-hmm. But he's a guy that can call your defense. He's very smart. He can turn and run with opposing tight ends. He's not going to get beat on the outside going to cover a screen pass. I think he's better as a will, but you can see him being a guy that gets the green dot in a year or 2. I like Jack Campbell. I think he's a little high for that range.
Yeah, that name's been getting a lot of run past probably a week and a half, 2 weeks. Jack Campbell.
Yeah, so he tested really, really well at the combine and at the pro day. He doesn't play that way, but that's not to say that he's not a very talented player. And he's another one of those cerebral guys. I like to think my working theory is that D'Amico is going to want D'Amico 2.0 to play for him, and that guy is not really in this draft.
Okay.
I mean, Drew Sanders. I don't buy the 1 year high. Like I like what I see, but I need to see more of it because this is a guy who could not get on the field at Alabama, and Alabama's linebackers were not good. I know Henry Toto is a guy that's going to get drafted, but hopefully not by any team that I care about. Did I say that out loud?
That's funny.
You know, there's trying to think of some like mid round guys that I liked.
What's your deal against Toto?
I just think that he is one of those guys, like, you can see it on Alabama film. He sees what's going to happen and then is like, do I react to that or do I not? Like, is that somebody else's job? And then he goes and he's not that fast. And that's a problem for me. I'll give you a later guy. Okay. Nick Hampton out of Appalachian State is a guy who fits that role. And he's a guy that at worst, he's your special teams captain right away. Like, this is a guy who's going to clean up on that, but he's what, 6'1", 237, I want to say, and he can thump. He can play in between the tackles without a lot of protection needed. He is a guy who can get and create a little bit of space for himself to make a tackle. He does not have the deep range that you would like, but D'Amico didn't either.
You think I've seen some have Hampton as more of an outside linebacker or maybe an edge guy? You think he can slide back over the middle?
He could. He actually played edge quite a bit for Appalachian. I'm not sure it was full time. I won't confess to have watching all of the Mountaineer games, but I saw a good portion of them. He's a guy that you can move him around. He not to lean on Detroit here, but he's got some Derek Barnes to him, a guy who was a 3rd round pick a couple of seasons ago, and he's been okay. The Lions aren't necessarily trying to replace him, but I don't think he's a long-term piece. And I think Hampton can be that kind of a guy if you want him in the middle. But there's not a lot of like traditional, like a guy like Noah Sewell coming into the year was a 1st round pick. And if you watched any Oregon at all, you're like, oh my God, what happened to that guy? It looks like he's it looks like he's wearing like a weight vest. That's how slow he's moving.
Yeah, one of my good friends is a big Oregon fan, and he was the same thing 2 years ago. Like, Sewell's going to be the guy. Sewell's going to be the guy. And then this past year, he just looks like he has cement boots on. I mean, it just something fell off with him, and I don't know what exactly, but he just does not have the speed, does not have the recognition, does not have the reads that he was putting together 2 years ago. And consequently, he's going to probably fall, to day 3, and rightly so. I mean, hopefully, maybe he'll figure it out at the next level. Maybe he'll get a good situation and get it back. But yeah, I'll
give you one other one that just popped in my mind. Ivan Pace Jr. out of Cincinnati. He's best known for A-gap blitzing. He is a thumper in that sort of range. This is a guy that I like quite a bit in that role, and he is a Mike. You don't want him playing a lot of like rangy stuff, but he's a good player that you could get probably late 3rd, 4th, in the range where you can certainly maneuver up 10 to 15 spots if you need to, and give away one of the 6th round picks that we don't expect them to use.
Got one question here on Owen Papao.
Oh yeah, good call
from Auburn.
He's better than Pace. So yes, that's a good one. Thank you for bringing that up. That would have been.
He's a lighter individual too, though, huh?
He is. You would never know it by watching him play, but he is. He was on the Bruce Feldman freaks list. He's really, really strong for his size, and he's one of those guys like you. When he hits you, it sounds a little different. And I can see D'Amico liking that kind of guy.
4.39 40.
Yeah, and he does play to that speed. Auburn is one of those schools that uses the GPS timing with the chips in it. Mm-hmm. He topped 20 miles an hour as a linebacker. That's moving.
Yeah. Huh. Man, there's definitely some potential there for sure. Like you said, there's probably no prototypical D'Amico Ryans choice of where they might be able to look for their guy this year, but they're gonna have to. Maybe they just carry over with their guys and maybe look for that prototypical guy next year. But it's just that linebacker course got no depth and a lot of age there. So that's one area I think this team.
I would agree. That's one of those where you can find, again, middle round help. It's not going to be a guy that's going to stand out for you, but it's a guy who can be an average starter for you, which would probably represent an upgrade over what we've seen out of Houston lately.
So sticking with the defensive side and cornerbacks, the team obviously took Derek Stingley last year, got a lot of good value out of Steven Nelson, and he's got 1 year left on his contract. There was grumblings that he wanted to raise and was willing to retire if he didn't get his raise. And I don't know that that's a good path with Nick, but we'll just assume that he'll be here playing, but he's only got 1 year left on his contract. And Desmond King is in the last year of his contract. Tavier Thomas signed a 1 year deal. So just another position with no youth or depth out there. And it's the same thing, same area, day 2, early day 3. What type of cornerback do you think, speaking strictly to the outside cornerbacks, not a slot cornerback, what kind of cornerback do you think D'Amico is looking for? More of a hands-on press guy? It seemed like they run 50-50 zone man out in San Francisco, and see if that carries over to here. But
yeah, that's the tough thing, is because San Francisco's coverage scheme is so variable based on the opponent that they're facing almost. If when they play Seattle, they go to more zone because Seattle has all that speed and size. But when they play a team like Arizona that doesn't necessarily have that, they do more man. They man up against D-Hop quite a bit.
That's a bold decision.
Yeah. That's a choice, that's for sure. But when they had guys like Emmanuel Mosley, who was healthy, I can't ever say Lenore, that guy can play too. They can. They're versatile guys. There's two things that stand out with all those guys. They play very strong, whether it's in press or in zone, and they have enough recovery speed that if they do get turned around, they can turn around and make it up and play with some ball skills. So if you're looking for one of the easiest ways to get good on defense is to start taking the ball away, and that's something that I think Stingley can do that. I think Peter can. They have guys that can do that, but you want the long-term solution there. I totally get that. So I would look for guys that can, maybe get 2, 3, 4 interceptions reliably every year instead of getting one every 2 years. I think that's sort of where you'd be looking at. And this is a weird cornerback class.
The sizes are all over the place. I mean, you've got Witherspoon and Forbes, who are just little bitty guys, and then and Ringo, and complete opposite spectrum, and a lot of guys in the upper 190s, low 200s. And I just don't. This is one area I haven't really dove into or asked around of what D'Amico might be looking for. But are there any day 2 products, targets that might fit the bill in your opinion?
So if you can live with Clark Phillips being 5'9", he's probably the best cover corner in the entire draft out of Utah. But the thing is, he's 5'9", but he is an outside only corner. He's not quick and changing direction. He's not a guy that's that instant acceleration recovery speed. That's not what he does. He's more of a hands-on guy. He can play off zone and react off of it, but you want more shifty quickness in the slot for that style of defense, and that's not what he does. Hodges Tomlinson out of TCU is another guy. If you can live with his size deficiency, and it's a big deficiency, he's a really good player. There's a lot of that. There's some guys that not Deontay Banks, who I think is going to be gone in the top 20. The other guy from Maryland, and I can see him, but I can't think of his name. He fits that sort of role.
Bennett?
Yes. Ja'Cory Bennett. Thank you. Garrett Williams, if you're comfortable with a guy coming off of surgery, he's much more of a man-only guy.
What injury did he have? What is it?
He had a
was it
foot.
ACL?
I think it was a foot.
Okay.
So their running back was also hurt. One of them had a foot and one of them had an ACL. I can't keep track. But I like their running back too. There's those guys.
It was ACL. Okay.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. they I like a little bit later a guy out of UAB, Starling Thomas. I think is a guy that he's a guy that if you're going to hit on a guy in the 5th or 6th round, that I think can be a really good player in the way that they found Emmanuel Mosley in San Francisco, and some other teams have had some. I think he's that guy this year. So he's one to look for. But you're going to have to live with the deficiencies, and that's the thing. Like you can either get a guy who's really really fast, but doesn't have any instincts, or you can get a guy who's like super instinctive and a great cover guy, but he's small. Like you're going to have to figure out which way you want to create your defense there. And D'Amico's a bright dude, man. I loved the fact that he got the job. I really do. I think I think he was the right man for the job, but he's got to figure out pretty quickly what his players can do, and if he wants to be a guy who tailors his scheme to the players that he's got a little bit, or if he's like, no, man, I can't work with these guys. Get me this to make it work. And that's something that we're going to find out in the next 72 hours, what direction they start out with that anyways.
Yeah. And I think the cornerback group, I think is probably one of the more wild cards in how, like you said, the big range in size and configuration of these players and how they come off the board is going to be interesting to watch. And what do you make of, we've seen, Joe Schoen say when they ask him how many first round grades do you have on players, and he's like, I'm not going to put a number on it. It's extremely low. Chris Ballard said 17. One anonymous GM said less than 10. And it seems like the consensus is that this is from a first round grade talent, this is a very slim draft class in terms of that. Does that make for a more wild card session once you get past pick like 12, 13, and then you're going to see a team draft a player that one team has on their board as a 4th round talent, but they have him as a 2nd round talent, and some teams are just going to have to concede the fact that they're drafting players in the 1st round with second round grades. But
yeah,
I mean, am I off on that? Thinking that it's just going to be just a crazy, crazy wild draft. You're going to have some just complete surprises.
Yeah,
some guys sitting in the green room for a little while.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because Keon White is going to be there, and I happen to like his potential. Much like Tyree Wilson, I'm not sure that Georgia Tech knew what they had in him. I think he's a 3 technique. Dude, go to Whataburger like twice a week and gain an extra 5 pounds and play defensive tackle full time. I wish Georgia Tech would have done that, but he's a guy that like I can see some teams really liking him, and I can also see some teams like, no. Go away! What are you doing here? And I think there's a few players that are like. I think Van Ness is going to be like that. I think I happen to really like Devon Witherspoon, but he is not going to be for everybody. He is not like if you're a team that can't live with your outside corner gambling to make a play, he's not for you. I think he's going to be Detroit's pick at 6 if Will Anderson isn't on the board. I like him very much for that fit. But you put him in Cleveland, you put him in Tennessee, like no, it doesn't work. I think there's a lot of very scheme specific or team specific draft talents in this class. Those are a few of them, but even at the top, like I don't think Jalen Carter's for everybody. He's a phenomenal player, but for all the histrionics that we've gone through about him, the guy got 6 sacks in 38 games, and I think the hype machine got a little out of control on how good of a player he is. He's a great talent. He's my number 5 overall player, and I think he's going in the top 5. But I'm worried that people are going to expect him to be Michael Strahan, and that's not who he is. That's not who he was in college.
Yeah, no, I think this is just going to be a wild draft for sure. The last position group I wanted to talk about, and it's been talked about as a very strong group, is the tight end group. Houston, they signed Dalton Schultz to a 1-year deal.
I like that, by the way. He's a good player.
Yeah. Whether or not that turns into something more than 1 year, we'll have to wait and see. the ghost of Brevin Jordan's still here, and Tegan Catoriano, who was actually kind of a pleasant surprise last year.
I don't dislike him either. In fact, I actually had him mocked to the Texans. I had it around early, but I think that was actually the only Texans pick I got right last year.
Yeah.
I did have Stingley, but
yeah, he was a pleasant surprise, but absent of Catoriano, which I mean he is what he is, and I don't know how much more longer the Brevin Jordan experiment is going to happen. And like we said, Dalton Schultz is 1 year for now. This tight end's got to be something they may potentially look at, and whether it's day 2 or day 3. It seems like this is a fairly deep class.
Oh yeah, it's a very good class. Now again, you're going to have to deal with the deficiency and you got to pick what you want. Like you want a wide receiver that's supersized playing tight end. Luke Musgrave is out there. Dalton Kincaid is out there. There's a few of those guys. I am personally not a Luke Musgrave fan. Anybody that has a 20% drop rate and didn't even he surpassed that at the Senior Bowl. This was a guy, he dropped 4 straight passes to him in Mobile, like not even difficult passes. Like he's looking to turn up at the field before the ball's there.
Yeah,
and I don't know how much better that's going to get, but he's certainly a physical specimen. You can get a guy, Michigan's Michael Schoonmaker, tall, 6'6", inline guy, not ever going to run past anybody in coverage, but man, he's really good at what he does. There's a bunch of those dudes in this class too that you can make some things happen with. You're not going to get Michael Mayer. At least I don't think that's realistic. And I think Kincaid might actually be off the board before you pick at 32 as well. So you're looking.
Darnell Washington's probably going to get out pretty quick too.
I'm so worried about Darnell Washington. That's another guy. Like I can see him becoming a star. I can also see him like being on 4 teams in 6 years because he just doesn't live up to the hype. But he's certainly got potential. If you go a little bit later, like Davis Allen out of Clemson is a guy who good player. He can definitely play. I'm trying to think of a couple other guys. There's talent there.
Yeah, once you get out there, there's some really tall guys. I mean, Zach Kuntz is 6'7", Josh Wiley 6'6".
Yeah. And again, but you're dealing with deficiencies again, like Zach Kuntz, this guy who couldn't get on the field at Penn State, transferred to Old Dominion and broke out. But did he break out because he was the only guy there who can catch the ball? Those are the sort of things you have to wait with that. I like Payne Durham if you're looking like 6th, 7th round. For my money, he was the best tight end in Mobile. He does have good tape at Purdue. It's inconsistent, but if you can harness his goodness, he's a very solid number 2 tight end for you.
Yeah, because I don't know how much of a blocker Dalton Schultz is. Decent, not great. And Catoriano is still going to be a work in progress. But so I feel like given Schultz's and Brevin Jordan's abilities, I feel like an inline type of tight end is maybe where they go, unless just one of the playmakers falls into their lap, falls down the board or something. But I feel like another inline guy that can block, that can be a red zone target, intermediate field, sneak out for a reception or 2 is maybe something where they go. And there's definitely probably a few guys that fit that bill on day 2, or at least day 3.
Oh, absolutely. It's a good year to need a budget tight end like that. Again, you're going to have a deficiency, but I love the idea of finding a guy who can line up in line, slow down an edge rusher, and then go out and catch a 5-yard Texas router and out. Yeah, there's a lot of guys that can do that in this draft. It's a good time to need one.
Oh, we got a Kahale Waring comment. Gosh, that's brutal.
That was a really, really bad. That was the last year that I covered the Texans for the draft, and I knew he stunk. I knew he was bad. I knew he was a water polo player masquerading as a football player.
Man, he just looked like a specimen at camp at OTAs.
He sure did.
Got me all I even picked him up on a dynasty fantasy team. I was all excited, and everybody in the league's like, "You're an idiot." And sure enough, I ended up being one. But that was, and then
I believe he's in the XFL now. I want to
yeah.
say.
I mean, he hit up like 4 teams in a span of like 4 days. I've never seen somebody's name end up on the NFL transaction wire so quickly within a 5-day span of teams signed and released. I mean, you just had to be wild to get signed and released inside of a 24-hour period in the middle of the season. So
You can't make it through one practice. That's not good.
what about Tucker Kraft? There's a question from Marco on Tucker Kraft out of South Dakota State.
So I will freely admit, I've seen 2 of his games, but I liked what I saw. I need to see more to have a really good feel for him.
Fair enough. Man, that's a lot to cover. I think I got everything I wanted to get through. Like I said, my wheel's broken. We'll see what happens at 1.02. I'm at the point where nothing will surprise me. I've built out a mental version of my flow chart, and about every 30 minutes a new branch gets added. And it's if the first question is always, did Carolina take Bryce Young? Yes or no? And if it's no, then it's Levis, Anderson, Wilson, trade back, and it's just getting out of hand. And I pray, I give it to Ian Rappaport and Pete like that, where they just like, man, nothing's coming out. I have no clue. And we saw Daniel Jeremiah's final mock come out this evening with CJ Stroud at 2, and then a trade up with Arizona at 3 to get Will Anderson. I think they would have swapped the picks and then given up, I think, 33, 73, and a 22 or a next year's 3rd rounder, which wasn't a crazy package. Keeping all your future ones is
that's important.
That would be great. But even my understanding, Daniel Jeremiah, when he does that mock, and especially tonight's mock, he even admits that I really don't know what's going on. So this is just what I think is the best solution.
100%.
And so I think a lot of people need to keep that in mind. And so,
yeah, I'm really confident in number 1 being Bryce Young. Yeah. I'm probably stupidly confident that Jalen Carter is going 5 to Seattle, even though like everybody's saying that's not going to happen now.
Yeah.
For a good 2.5 months before that, before smoke season really started, every single person was like, they're taking Jalen Carter. Mm-hmm. So I rolled with that. If I'm wrong on that, so be it. But I put the over under for the amount of picks that I got right in the first round at 3.5, which would be absurdly low. But
yeah,
it could very well happen.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a fun one, man. I really appreciate the time, Jeff. It's good to chat with you again. We did this over Spaces last year, so it's good to get it face to face, and I appreciate all the commentary you give me throughout the year. And
I am no longer covering the Texans, but I have 2 kids that are both big Texans fans living here in Michigan.
They're big kids. Regardless, kids. I see the pictures, man.
We actually for spring break we came down and visited Rice and visited their basketball program, and might be visiting there again sometime soon. We'll see.
Are they? Is one of them a senior?
He's a junior.
Junior. Okay.
He's 6'9", and then my daughter she's normal human size. She's 5'10", but she's a point guard and 8th grader, and she's pretty good too.
My daughter's never going to reach that because my wife is a whole 4'11". So
yeah. So my wife is 6'2". I'm 6'5". We both played volleyball, so
yeah,
got a little bit of an advantage there.
Right. How's there's a question on here about Brad Holmes. I mean, how it seems Detroit's got a good formula going, and they've got a good package going up there. What's your assessment on him?
We're happy with Brad Holmes. We are weirdly confident in Brad Holmes. He does need to get it right this year, though, because this is a team. I mean, look, Detroit's never won a division title since they went to the NFC North. Mm-hmm. They are they should be the favorites, especially with Aaron Rodgers
Yeah.
out now. Like everything is there. The way they finished 8-2 after starting 6-1 or 1-6, I should say. Their defense finally started playing, and now they've got 2 first rounds. They've got 2 second rounders. They did great in free agency. Like, there's no reason they shouldn't win the division, and we don't really know how to handle those sorts of expectations. Normally the draft is like our first 5 guys we draft are all going to be starting like right away. This year, they're going to draft somebody at 6, and he might not start in 2023.
That's
like,
not a bad
weird.
thing.
It's
not a bad
weird,
thing.
man. I do radio up here in Grand Rapids, and people call in and they're like, "What do you mean you're not going to start?" I'm like, "Who's he better than that's on the roster now?" It's a very strange problem, and I like it. And Brad Holmes deserves a whole lot of credit for how well he has managed to find value, especially in the middle rounds of the draft, getting guys like Malcolm Rodriguez, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Kirby Joseph. Like, these are all guys that are really good players, and he kind of zapped them from out of the ether.
Yeah, it's great to hear it. I'm all for dynasties and whatnot, but I also like parity, and I like to see some new teams get up there and get in the light a little bit, and hopefully my Texans will find their way back forward. We'll have to see.
It's the AFC South is a division where you can get healthy quickly. Jacksonville proved that.
Yep.
I don't think they're going away, but I don't know what's going on in Tennessee. Who knows what's going to happen with Indianapolis?
Tennessee's on a rebuild. They're about to enter the zone where Rand Carthon's got a job in front of him. Their salary cap's a little backwards. They've got a lot of aging players. They've got an offensive line that's near non-existent at this point in time. And I see it, I see people mocking. They're like, "Oh, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, maybe they go quarterback." I'm like, they need a tackle.
Their line is really bad.
Yeah.
They
need no way Rand Carthon goes in with quarterback or something with that offensive line. So they got a lot of areas to address. And I think Tennessee is their arrows pointing down for them. And Houston is just going to have to wait and see. I think fans are getting on. I think this is Nick's last year of, okay, we've been waiting. It's 2 years. Let's start to see some growth. And the fans.
I think he drafted well last year overall. Yeah. And I think if he strings another one together here, the 2021 season where they were the worst team in the league and they were also the oldest team in the league. Like, you cannot have that happen.
Yeah.
That's sort of actually where Tennessee is headed. Chicago got there too. It's weird how those teams here, because they're like, Houston's going a different route now. It does take some time, but the payoff, if they get quarterback right and a playmaker or 2 emerges and their defense can take the ball away, no reason they can't bubble up and pass at least one of the teams ahead of them this coming season. And that's where you start from. You gotta build that up.
Yeah, because they're now on different timelines. D'Amico, 6-year contract, first year for him, 6-year contract for Nick, but this is year 3 for him. So much different timelines between the two. And it scares me when you see like knucklehead Steve Keim making comments about, I didn't draft Nick Bosa because I needed to preserve my job, essentially paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And not to say Nick would do that. And I'm certainly not saying that here, but it just, when you start getting your GM and your coaches on different timelines and different needs and perceptions, it just kind of concerns me a little bit. So it makes me wonder, we'll see how this draft plays out, and how this draft plays out will kind of answer for me what Nick's immediate future is. And if it goes one way, I wouldn't be shocked to see Nick gone by the end of the season. And if it goes another way, then he could be here for the long haul. And I know what he said at the press conference, that he's not going anywhere. I don't buy that 100%. So we'll just have to wait and see. But this is going to be this is probably his most crucial draft that he's going to have. And hopefully it's not his last for him. So with that, Jeff, I appreciate it, man. Big fan. We'll be following as always. And I hope you have a wonderful draft. I know you'll be ready to get some sleep after this weekend. And
yes. This is the last night that I sleep for a while. And I've already cleared it with my wife. I'm not getting up with the kids I'm sleeping as late as I can because this weekend is coffee and all sorts of bad food to keep the fuel going.
Man, yeah, it's a fun one for especially tomorrow night because I was Omar, the Texans director of PR. He had texted me last night. He's like, "Hey, are you coming up to the stadium? Or are you coming up to the draft party so that he can get my credential?" And I'm like, "No, my wife is going out of town, so I'm going to be sitting in a Karate Jojo parking lot with my son in the back seat when Houston is announcing their second overall pick." So
I've been there, man. I
I'm gonna,
last year for the draft, my daughter plays volleyball. I was at a volleyball tournament. I was camped out at the Buffalo Wild Wings in downtown Grand Rapids, watching and writing at the bar. Fortunately, the bartender was very courteous. She's like, "You need to plug in, son. You know, you need the landline." I'm like, "Yes, thank you."
Yeah.
They did a great job for it, but it's tough when there's all that crap going on around you.
No, dad duty calls first, and that's
That's
that
for
is
sure.
what it
That's the
is.
way to do it.
But yeah, so we'll let you get out of here, man.
All right.
Everybody, I appreciate listening in. You can Jeff, what's your you got it up here at Jeff Risdon on Twitter, Draft Wire on USA Today, the Lions Wire on USA Today, podcasts everywhere. So make sure you follow his work. Extremely smart dude. I lean on him all the time. And
you're too kind, man. Thanks for having me in, bro. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. Everybody, have a good evening. And with that, we'll shut it down. Thank you.